I was born with a curse, a sense of smell so powerful it drove me into hiding, until the day I detected poison in our Alpha King's cup. What would you do if the very thing that made you an outcast became your only chance at saving the one person who might understand you? I was born different. My nose catches smells that no one else can. While others might smell cookies baking, I smell each spice, the butter, the heat of the oven, and even the mood of the person who made them. This gift has always been more of a curse. Strong smells hurt me like a knife to my head. When I was little, the other kids would spray perfume near me to watch me cry. They called me weird. They called me broken. They said a true Omega should be normal, should fit in, should want to please others. But how could I please anyone when even walking through the village market made me sick? My parents tried to help. They gave me herbs to dull my senses and taught me to breathe through my mouth. Nothing worked. By the time I turned 16, I knew I had to live alone. I found a small hut at the edge of the forest, far from the smells of too many people. I fixed it up with my own hands, sealing the cracks in the walls and making curtains from plain cloth that I washed in clear water, not the strong soap others used. In my little home, I could breathe. I planted a garden with gentle-smelling herbs and flowers. I learned which berries and mushrooms were safe by their smell alone. The forest animals didn't mind me. Sometimes deer would eat from my hand, and birds would nest in the trees near my window. I was alone, but not lonely. At least that's what I told myself on cold nights when the wind howled and my bed felt too big for just me. I made my own soaps from ash and fat with just a touch of lavender. I baked my own bread and traded extra loaves for the few things I couldn't make myself. The village people took my bread, but kept their distance. They whispered when I passed. "There goes the strange one," they would say. "The one who can't stand to be near normal folk." Children were told to stay away from me, as if my strangeness might catch like a cold. I built a life in my little bubble, safe from the world that had no place for someone like me. When I had to go to the village, I wrapped a scarf around my nose and mouth and moved quickly, getting what I needed and leaving before the smells could overwhelm me. Most days, I didn't see another person at all. Then came the time of the autumn moon feast. Once each year, every person in the kingdom had to attend, even outcasts like me. It was the law. Missing the feast could mean prison or worse. So each year, I would go. I would stand in the corner of the great hall, as far from the food and the crowds as possible. I would keep my eyes down and count the minutes until I could leave. This year, the smell seemed even stronger. The hall was packed with more people than I had ever seen, all of them eating rich foods and drinking strong wine. The air was thick with smoke from the great fires and hundreds of candles. People had bathed in perfumed water and oiled their hair. Women wore flowers in their braids, and men had rubbed their wrists with crushed herbs to smell attractive. For me, it was torture. Each smell fought with the others, making my head spin and my stomach turn. I pressed myself against the cold stone wall and tried to breathe through my mouth. I had a small jar of mint paste that I dabbed under my nose, but it barely helped. The noise was almost as bad as the smells. Laughing, shouting, the clang of plates and cups, music from 3 different groups of players. I focused on staying upright, on not running away before the required time had passed. I stared at the floor, counting the stones, naming the colors, anything to distract myself from the assault on my senses. A hush fell over the room, rolling like a wave from the front doors toward the back where I stood. The smells shifted too, as people straightened up and tried to look their best. Fear, excitement, and respect created a new layer of scents in the already thick air. Despite myself, I looked up, and that's when I saw him. The Alpha King. He walked through the crowd, which parted before him like water around a stone. He was taller than any man I had ever seen, with shoulders as broad as an oak. His hair was the dark brown of rich earth, braided with gold threads that caught the light from the torches. He wore a simple crown, just a band of metal with 3 points. But he needed no crown to mark him as king. Power rolled off him like a storm. His smell reached me even across the room. Forest after rain, sun on stone, a hint of smoke, and something wild that made my heart beat faster. I breathed it in before I could stop myself, and my head cleared for the first time since entering the hall. As if he felt my gaze, the king turned. His eyes, the golden brown of honey in sunlight, swept the crowd. And then, somehow, they found me. Our eyes met for just a moment, but it felt like forever. Something passed between us, a spark of something I couldn't name. Recognition? Question? I couldn't tell, but for that brief moment, the rest of the room faded away. There was only him, only me, only that strange connection. Then his advisor whispered in his ear, and he turned away. The moment broke. The smells and sounds came crashing back, worse than before. But now there was a new smell. Curiosity from those who had seen the king look my way. Already, people were turning to stare at me, wondering why the Alpha King had noticed the strange Omega who lived alone in the woods. Panic rose in my throat. I couldn't bear it. The attention, the questions that would come, the people who might try to talk to me. Before anyone could approach, I slipped along the wall toward the side door. My hands shook as I pushed it open and gulped the cool night air. I ran. My feet knew the way home even in the dark. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs ached, until I reached my little hut and threw the bolt across the door. Safe. I was safe again. But as I sank into my chair by the cold hearth, I realized something had changed. The memory of those eyes, that smell, that moment of connection, it had followed me home. For the first time in years, my little sanctuary felt empty rather than peaceful, lonely rather than safe. I tried to push the feeling away. I lit my fire and made tea from the mint in my garden. I changed into my night clothes and wrapped myself in the blanket my mother had made before I left home. But when I closed my eyes, I saw him. When I breathed deeply, I caught a ghost of his scent. Stop it, I told myself firmly. He's the Alpha King. You're the weird Omega who can't even stand to be in a room with other people. Nothing will come of that look. Nothing can come of it. But my heart didn't listen. As I drifted off to sleep, I wondered what it might be like to breathe him in again, to stand close enough to separate all the notes of his scent, to look into those eyes and not feel afraid. I dreamed of forests after rain, of honey gold eyes, of a voice I had never heard calling my name. I dreamed of belonging somewhere, with someone, after a lifetime of being alone. When morning came, I pushed the dreams away and went back to my quiet life. I baked bread, I tended my garden, I mended a hole in my winter cloak. But something had shifted inside me. Like the first crack in ice when spring comes, I had seen something beyond my small world, and now my small world didn't feel quite big enough anymore. 3 days passed after the feast. I tried to forget those golden eyes, to settle back into my quiet life. The weather turned cold, with a bite in the air that promised an early winter. I gathered the last herbs from my garden and hung them to dry from the rafters. The familiar work calmed me, and I began to think that life would go back to normal. Then came the storm. It started in the afternoon with dark clouds rolling in from the north. By sunset, rain lashed against my windows, and wind howled through the trees. I added extra wood to my fire and wrapped my thickest blanket around my shoulders. Storms didn't usually scare me, but this one felt different. The air had a strange smell, like metal and ice mixed together. I was making tea when I heard it, a pounding on my door so loud it made my cups rattle on their shelf. At first, I thought it was just a branch blown by the wind. Then it came again, harder this time, with a voice calling words I couldn't make out over the storm. No one ever came to my home, especially not in weather like this. Fear made my heart race as I crept to the door, a knife clutched in my hand. "Who's there?" I called, trying to sound brave. "Please, help us." The voice was high with panic. "The king is hurt." The king? It couldn't be. I must have heard wrong. I cracked the door open an inch, then gasped as the wind tore it from my grip, throwing it wide. Rain blew in, soaking my floor and my clothes in seconds. But I barely noticed because of what I saw on my doorstep. 3 figures huddled there, drenched and shivering. One was a small, thin man with spectacles sliding down his wet nose, the king's advisor. I realized with shock. He was supporting the weight of the Alpha King himself, who slumped against him, eyes closed, face pale as death. At their feet sat a small child, a girl no older than 6, her arms wrapped around her knees, her face streaked with tears and rain. "Please," the advisor begged, his voice breaking. "They say you can smell what others can't. The royal doctors are lost. They don't know what's wrong with him." The child looked up at me with wide, frightened eyes. "He saved me," she whispered. "Please save him." I stood frozen for a moment, my mind racing. The Alpha King, here, at my home. Sick or hurt or worse. I wasn't a doctor. I wasn't anything but a strange Omega who lived alone because I couldn't handle the world. What could I do? Then the wind shifted, and I caught a scent that made my blood run cold. It wasn't a smell exactly, but the lack of one. A blank space where something should be. I'd smelled it once before, years ago, when a hunter died near my home. His food had been tampered with, the smell of the poison hidden by strong spices, but not hidden from me. The same wrongness clung to the king now, and to the child as well, though fainter on her. Someone had tried to kill them both. "Bring them inside," I said, stepping back from the door. "Hurry!" The advisor dragged the king over my threshold while I scooped up the child. Her small body was ice cold, and she clung to me like I was her only hope. Maybe I was. "Put him by the fire," I ordered, surprised at the strength in my voice. I set the child on my bed and wrapped her in my thickest blanket. To the advisor, I said, "Close the door and bring me clean water from the barrel by the window." My fear wasn't gone, but something stronger pushed it aside. These people needed help, and somehow I was the only one who could give it. I knelt beside the king, who lay on my hearthrug, his fine clothes soaked and muddy. Up close, his face was even more striking than I remembered. Strong jaw, straight nose, thick eyelashes now resting against 2 pale cheeks. His skin burned with fever when I touched his forehead. That strange absence of smell was stronger now. I closed my eyes and focused, sorting through the scents around me. Wet wool, smoke from my fire, the herbal soap I'd used that morning, the sweet milk bread cooling on my table. Beneath all that was the king's natural scent, forest after rain, but it was fading, being eaten away by the wrongness. I had to work fast. "How did this happen?" I asked the advisor, who hovered nearby, wringing his hands. "The feast," he said. 3 nights ago. His Majesty and several others fell ill afterward. The royal kitchen thought it was bad meat, but then people started dying. The king has lasted longer than the rest, but he grows weaker by the hour. And the child? She's from the kitchens. Her mother was one of the cooks who died. The king insisted on bringing her when he fled the palace. So the king had run from his own home, bringing an orphan child with him. And somehow, he'd come here, to me. It didn't make sense. "Why me?" I asked. "Why bring him here?" The advisor looked away. "His Majesty, he asked for you before he lost consciousness. He said to find the Omega with the special nose, the one from the feast." My cheeks grew hot. The king had remembered me, had asked for me. A small voice broke into my thoughts. "I'm cold," the child whispered from my bed, "and my tummy hurts." I turned back to the task at hand. Questions could wait. Lives couldn't. I hurried to my shelves of dried herbs and medicines. My fingers found what I needed without hesitation. willow bark for fever, charcoal to absorb poison, mint to settle the stomach, and my rarest herb of all, a small pouch of blue flowers that only grew by the light of the full moon. Poisonbane, my mother had called it. I'd never had to use it before. I crushed the herbs in my mortar, my hands shaking slightly. What if I was wrong? What if I made things worse? No. I knew that smell of wrongness. I knew what to do. I mixed the herbs with honey and hot water, making one strong cup for the king and a weaker one for the child. To the advisor, I said, "Help me lift his head." Together, we raised the king enough for me to press the cup to his lips. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't drink. Then his eyes fluttered open, just a sliver of gold visible beneath heavy lids. "You," he murmured, his voice rough as stone. My heart jumped. "Yes," I said softly. "It's me. You need to drink this." His eyes held mine for a breath, too. Then he parted his lips and let me tip the medicine into his mouth. After he'd taken enough, I moved to the child and helped her drink her portion. She made a face at the bitter taste, but swallowed it all when I promised her honey bread after. "What now?" the advisor asked, looking from the king to me with a mix of hope and doubt on his face. "Now we wait," I said, trying to sound more sure than I felt. The hours crept by. The storm raged on outside, making my little hut creak and groan. The child fell asleep quickly, curled up in my bed like a kitten. I gave the advisor my only chair and knelt by the king, checking his fever, listening to his breathing, brewing more medicine when the first dose was gone. Midnight came and went. The advisor dozed off, his chin on his chest. Only I stayed awake, watching over my strange guests. The king's fever broke just before dawn. I felt the change in his skin first, the burning heat fading to normal warmth. Then his breathing deepened and steadied. The wrongness in his scent began to fade, pushed back by the clean forest smell that was truly his. When the first gray light of morning filtered through my windows, his eyes opened fully. They were clearer now, aware. He looked at me for a long moment, taking in my simple home, my worn clothes, my tired face. "You saved me," he said finally, his voice low and rough. "I did what anyone would do," I replied, looking away from the intensity of his gaze. "No." His hand found mine, his fingers wrapping around my wrist. His touch sent a shock through me. "You did what no one else could do." "I knew you would." "Ow," I whispered. "How did you know?" A small smile touched his lips. "I smelled it on you. Not as you smell things, but in my own way. I smelled your strength, your kindness." He paused. "Your loneliness." I didn't know what to say to that. I'd never thought of my scent reaching others, telling my secrets. "The child?" he asked, trying to sit up. "She's safe," I assured him, pointing to my bed where she still slept. The poison affected her less. Children are stronger than we think. He relaxed back onto my hearth rug, but kept his hold on my wrist. "What is your name?" he asked. I realized then that in all the rush, we had never properly met. The mighty Alpha King was lying on my floor, and he didn't even know my name. I started, but was cut off by a loud crash outside. The advisor jerked awake. What was that? I moved to the window and peered out. The storm had passed, leaving behind a clear, cold morning, and standing in my garden, trampling my herbs, were 5 men in the Royal Guard's uniform. "They found us," the advisor whispered, fear thick in his voice. The king struggled to sit up. No one was supposed to know where we went. No one except those I trust most. A heavy knock rattled my door. "Open in the name of the Royal Council," a gruff voice commanded. The king's eyes met mine, golden and fierce despite his weakness. "Don't open it," he said. "Not yet." I stood in the middle of my small home, suddenly aware of how fragile it all was. my walls, my safety, my solitude. In the space of one night, my quiet life had been shattered. I had the Alpha King and a child to protect, royal guards at my door, and the smell of danger thick in the air. And, strangely, for the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid. The royal guards stayed outside my door. The king spoke to them through the window, his voice weak, but still carrying the weight of command. He told them to make camp nearby and keep watch, but not to enter. I didn't hear all of what he said about why, but the guards bowed low and backed away. They will protect us, not threaten us, the king said, sinking back down onto my hearth rug. His face was still too pale, and his hands shook slightly. But I don't trust anyone completely right now. I nodded, understanding. Someone had tried to kill him. The poison still clung to him like a shadow, even as my medicine fought against it. You need rest, I told him, trying to sound firm despite the strangeness of giving orders to the Alpha King. And food, if you can keep it down. The little girl woke then, her eyes big and scared, until they landed on the king. Your Highness, you're better! She scrambled from my bed and threw herself at him, small arms wrapping around his neck. He winced at the impact but held her close, one large hand smoothing her tangled hair. Thanks to our host, he said, his eyes finding mine over the child's shoulder. What shall we call you, brave one? I told him my name, feeling shy suddenly. It had been so long since anyone had used it. And you, little one? He asked the child. Talia, she whispered. My mama called me Talia. Pain flashed across the king's face. Talia, I'm so sorry about your mother. She was a good woman and a fine cook. Talia's bottom lip trembled. The bad men hurt her. They hurt you too. The king and his advisor exchanged a look. Yes, the king said. Bad men put something in the food, but we're safe now. I set about making a simple breakfast. Porridge sweetened with honey from my own bees, and mint tea to settle their stomachs. The advisor, whose name was Eldon, helped me by fetching water and firewood. He seemed eager to be useful, to make up for bringing trouble to my door. The king tried to stand to help as well, but his legs gave way. I rushed to catch him before he hit the floor, finding myself with my arms around his waist, his weight heavy against me. Our faces were suddenly very close. I could count the flecks of darker gold in his eyes, could feel the warmth of his breath on my cheek. His scent wrapped around me, forest, rain, and something deeper that made my heart beat faster. Careful, I said, my voice coming out as a whisper. The poison is still in you. You need to rest. He let me help him to my bed, his hand lingering on my arm even after he was settled. I've put you out of your bed, he said, frowning. I don't mind, I assured him. I often sleep by the fire anyway. We settled into a strange routine over the next few days. The king rested in my bed, growing stronger each day. Talia stuck to him like a burr, curling up beside him to nap or sitting at the foot of the bed while I told her stories. Eldon came and went, carrying messages to the guards outside and bringing back news from the palace. None of it was good. More people had died from the poison. The council was fighting over who would rule if the king didn't return, and rumors spread that he was dead. Let them think that for now, the king said grimly. It will make the traitors careless. I kept making medicines and broths to heal the king and Talia. At first, my hands would shake when I had to touch the king, to check his fever, to help him sit up, to give him medicine. But as the days passed, it became easier. His touch no longer startled me. His scent became as familiar to me as my own. On the fourth night, when Talia and Eldon were asleep, the king asked me to sit with him. He had moved from my bed to a pile of blankets near the fire, insisting I take my bed back. I sat cross-legged beside him, the firelight dancing over his features. Tell me, he said softly, how long have you lived alone? 5 years, I replied, since I was 16. And before that? I looked into the flames, remembering. I lived with my parents in the village. My father was a baker. My mother knew about herbs and healing. They tried to help me fit in. I swallowed hard, but it was too hard for all of us. Because of your gift with sense? He asked. Gift. I gave a small laugh. I've never thought of it that way. It's always been a curse. I can't be around people because their smells are too strong, too much. Perfumes, sweat, food, emotions. They all crash into me at once. But my scent doesn't bother you? There was something careful in his voice, something hopeful. I felt my cheeks grow warm. No, I admitted. Yours is different, clean, simple. I didn't add that it was also beautiful, that I sometimes found myself breathing deeply just to take more of it in. What do emotions smell like? He asked, truly curious. No one had ever asked me that before. Most people just told me I was making things up. They're hard to describe, I said slowly. Fear is sharp and sour, like metal and spoiled milk mixed together. Joy is bright and bubbly, like sunshine on water. Anger is hot and thick, like smoke from a grease fire. And sadness? Like rain on cold stones, empty and heavy at the same time. He was quiet for a moment, taking this in. What a world you live in, he said finally. So much richer than ours, and so much harder. I blinked in surprise. You don't think I'm making it up? Or that I'm crazy? Why would I? He reached out to touch my hand, his fingers warm against mine. You saved my life with that nose of yours. You found poison that royal doctors couldn't detect. Tears pricked at my eyes. No one had ever understood before. No one had ever seen my difference as anything but wrong. What about you? I asked, wanting to shift attention away from my sudden emotion. What's it like to be the Alpha King? A shadow crossed his face. Lonely, he said, the word falling like a stone between us. Everyone wants something from me. Everyone sees the crown, not the man. He stared into the fire. I have advisors and servants and subjects by the thousands, but not one true friend. Not even Eldon? I asked, glancing at the sleeping advisor. Eldon is loyal, but he serves the crown as much as the man. The king sighed. Do you know, you're the first person in years who hasn't bowed or called me Your Majesty every other word? It's refreshing. I ducked my head, embarrassed. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be disrespectful. No. His hand tightened on mine. I like it. I like being just a man to someone, even if it took being poisoned to get here. We talked long into the night. He told me about growing up as the heir to the throne, about the weight of the crown he'd worn since his father died when he was just 18. He spoke of the loneliness of making decisions that affected thousands, of never knowing who to trust. I told him about growing up different, about the bullies who tormented me, about finding peace in my little house at the edge of the forest. I told him about my parents, who loved me but couldn't understand me, about the animals who became my friends when humans were too much to bear. Have you never wanted more? He asked gently. A mate? A family? I drew my knees up to my chest, suddenly feeling exposed. Who would want me? I can't even go to market without getting sick from the smells. I can't be at feasts or dances or any place with crowds. I shook my head. Besides, I'm happy here. I have my garden and my books and my herbs. Are you? He asked, his golden eyes seeing too much. Are you truly happy or just safe? The question hit me like a slap. I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it again. Was there a difference? Wasn't being safe the same as being happy? But I knew it wasn't. The past few days, chaotic as they had been, had shown me that. Having people in my space, caring for them, talking late into the night, it had been hard in some ways, but also good. Better than I wanted to admit. I don't know, I whispered finally. I don't know what I am anymore. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from my face. "You're brave," he said. "Braver than anyone I've ever known. To live with your gift, to save a king and a child who showed up at your door in the middle of the night, to face royal guards without flinching, that takes true courage." Something warm bloomed in my chest at his words. No one had ever called me brave before. We fell silent, the fire crackling between us. Talia mumbled something in her sleep and turned over. Outside, an owl hooted softly. "I should let you rest," I said, moving to stand. His hand caught mine again. "Stay," he said softly. "Just a little longer." So I stayed. We didn't talk anymore, but sat side by side, his hand holding mine, watching the flames dance. For the first time in years, the silence between me and another person felt comfortable. Right. As the fire burned down to embers, his head drooped onto my shoulder, sleep finally claiming him. I sat very still, not wanting to wake him. His weight against me felt strange and wonderful. His scent wrapped around me like a blanket. Pine and rain and something that smelled like home, though I'd never been anywhere but here. I'd spent my life running from closeness. Sure, it would hurt, but this closeness, with this man, didn't hurt at all. It felt like something I'd been missing without knowing it was gone. As dawn light crept through my windows, I realized with a mix of wonder and fear that everything was changing. My safe, lonely world was cracking open, and I wasn't sure I wanted to close it again. A week passed in my small house. The king grew stronger each day. He no longer needed my help to walk or eat. The poison smell faded from his skin until I could barely detect it. Talia, too, got better. Her cheeks grew rosy, and she started to smile more. She followed me around as I worked, asking questions about my herbs and helping me tend my garden. We settled into a strange kind of family. The king, the little girl, the advisor who came and went, and me. My quiet life wasn't quiet anymore, but I found I didn't mind. Each night, the king and I would talk by the fire after the others slept. Each day, I felt something new growing between us, fragile as a spring leaf. The king told his guards to stay hidden in the trees. He didn't want anyone to know where he was. "Not until I know who I can trust," he said. Even Eldon was only allowed to tell a few close friends at the palace that the king lived. "The council grows bolder," Eldon reported one evening, his face worried. "They say they must choose a new king soon if you don't return." The king's jaw tightened. "Let them try. A true king cannot be replaced so easily." I didn't understand all the palace talk, but I knew danger still lurked. I could smell worry on Eldon, sharp and tangy. I could see it in the way the king watched the forest from my windows, his eyes scanning for threats. On the 10th night, I woke to a strange smell. It cut through my dreams like a knife. Metal, sweat, horses, and something dark and oily that made the hairs on my neck stand up. I sat up from my pile of blankets by the fire, heart pounding. The king was already awake, sitting on the edge of my bed, his head lifted like an animal sensing danger. "What is it?" he whispered. "Someone's coming," I said, my voice shaking. "Not your guards. Someone else. Many people." He was on his feet in an instant, moving with the smooth grace that had returned to him. He went to the window and peered out into the darkness. "I don't see anything." "They're still far off," I said, closing my eyes to focus on the scent. "Coming from the east. Maybe 10 men, armed." The king looked at me with new respect. "How far?" I breathed deeply, sorting through the smells. "Half an hour away, if they're on foot. Sooner if they have horses." He nodded and began to move with purpose. He gently woke Talia and guided her to the small storage room at the back of my house. "Stay here, little one. Be very quiet, like we're playing hide and seek. Don't come out until one of us comes for you." Talia's eyes were wide with fear, but she nodded bravely. The king tucked my softest blanket around her and closed the door. "What about you?" he asked me. "Is there somewhere safe you can go?" I shook my head. "This is my home. I won't leave it." He looked like he wanted to argue, but there wasn't time. The smell of strangers grew stronger. They were coming faster than I'd thought. "My guards," the king said, moving toward the door. "I need to warn them." But before he could reach it, a pounding shook the wood. It was too late. "Open up," a gruff voice called. "By order of the royal council." The king pulled me behind him, his body suddenly seeming much larger, more powerful. I felt a change in his scent. The forest after rain was still there, but now it carried thunder, lightning, the wild power of a storm. My heart sped up at the shift. "Stay behind me," he growled, his voice deeper than I'd ever heard it. The pounding came again, harder this time. "We know the king is there. Surrender him to us." The king's hand found mine, squeezed once. "Whatever happens," he murmured, "know that these days with you have been the most real of my life." Before I could answer, the door burst open. Wood splintered as 3 men shouldered through, swords drawn. Behind them, more waited, torches lighting their hard faces. They wore the colors of the palace guard, but not the same ones as the king's loyal men. "Your Majesty," the leader said, bowing his head slightly. The gesture seemed more mockery than respect. "The council has been most concerned for your safety. We've come to escort you home." The king didn't move from in front of me. "Have you indeed? Strange that you break down a door to offer an escort." The leader's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We feared you might be reluctant. The council believes you've been bewitched by this person." His eyes flicked to me with disgust. "They say no proper king would hide away in the home of a defective Omega." I flinched at the cruel words. They were the same ones I'd heard all my life. But the king's reaction surprised me. A low rumble started in his chest, a sound I felt more than heard. The air around him seemed to shimmer with heat. "You dare," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "You dare to insult the one who saved my life when your masters tried to take it." The leader took a step back, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "Your Majesty, we have orders." "Your orders," the king cut in, "came from traitors and would-be murderers." Something was happening to him as he spoke. He seemed to grow taller, broader. The very air crackled around him. I'd heard tales of alpha power, of course, but I'd never seen it. The king had been too weak, too sick in the days he'd been with me. He was not weak now. "I am your king," he said, his voice rolling like thunder. "Not the council, not any traitor who seeks my throne. Me. And I command you to leave this place, now." Power flowed from him in waves. I could smell it, lightning before it strikes, wild and dangerous. The men at the door faltered. One dropped his sword, his hands shaking. "The council said you were dying," the leader said, his voice higher than before, "that the poison had weakened you beyond recovery. The council was wrong." The king took a step forward, and the men scrambled back. "As you can see, I am very much alive, and very, very angry." The leader tried once more. "Your Majesty, please, return with us to the palace. The kingdom needs you." His eyes darted to me again. "Leave this creature behind. She's clouded your mind with her strange ways." The king moved so fast I barely saw it. One moment he was in front of me, the next he had the leader by the throat, lifted off the ground. The other men cried out in alarm but didn't dare approach. "She," the king said, his voice deadly soft, "has more loyalty, more courage, and more worth than all of your council combined. She saved me when your masters poisoned me. She sheltered me when your masters hunted me. She is under my protection now, forever." He brought the man's face close to his. "Understand this. Anyone who threatens her threatens the crown itself." He released the man, who crumpled to the ground, gasping. The king stood over him, magnificent in his anger, a true alpha in all his power. Go, he commanded. Tell your masters I am coming. Tell them to prepare for justice. The men backed away, stumbling over each other in their haste to leave. Only when the last one disappeared into the trees did the king turn back to me. The power still rolled off him, making the air thick and hard to breathe. But as our eyes met, it softened. The storm in his scent calmed, returning to the gentle rain I'd grown to love. Are you all right? He asked, his voice once again the one I knew. I nodded, unable to speak. What I'd just seen had shaken me to my core. This was the true Alpha King, not the sick man I'd nursed, not the quiet friend who sat by my fire, but a force of nature, terrible and beautiful. And he had defended me, called me worthy, said I was under his protection forever. I'm sorry, he said, mistaking my silence for fear. I didn't mean to frighten you. I found my voice at last. You didn't, I said. I've never seen anything like that before. A small, almost shy smile touched his lips. Neither have I, to be honest. Not from myself. I've never felt that kind of rage before. He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly younger. The thought of them hurting you, it woke something in me. A sound from the storage room reminded us both of Talia. The king opened the door to find her curled in a tight ball, eyes squeezed shut. It's safe now, little one, he said gently, gathering her into his arms. The bad men are gone. She clung to his neck, burying her face against him. I was scared, she whispered. I heard yelling. I know, he soothed. But you were very brave to stay hidden. He carried her to my bed and laid her down. Try to sleep now. We'll keep you safe. It took a long time to calm her. The king sat on the edge of the bed, stroking her hair and humming a soft tune until her eyes grew heavy. I rebuilt the fire and made tea with calming herbs, chamomile and lavender and a touch of honey. Only when Talia was asleep did the king join me by the fire. He took the cup I offered, his fingers brushing mine. A spark jumped between us at the touch, and I knew he felt it too. They'll be back, he said quietly, with more men next time. I nodded, a lump in my throat. What will you do? He looked into the flames. What I must. Return to the palace. Root out the traitors. Be the king my people need. His eyes found mine, full of things unsaid. But not yet. Not tonight. He reached for my hand, and I gave it to him without hesitation. We sat in silence for a long time, the fire burning low, our fingers intertwined. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling my windows. The night felt full of change, of things ending and beginning. I knew then that our peaceful days were numbered. The world had found us, had broken through my safe little bubble. Soon the king would have to leave, to reclaim his throne and seek justice. And I would be alone again. But for now, for this moment, his hand was warm in mine. His scent wrapped around me like a promise. And despite the danger, despite the uncertain future, I felt strangely, wonderfully alive. Dawn came with a soft pink light that crept through my windows. I'd hardly